Welcome back to Virtual Pinball 101. There was something that is on my mind. I'm showing the adventures of Rocky and Bullwinkle and friends. I guess most people show off their AC/DC table, and although I do have a couple of those, and I'm more of a Helen fan than a Lucy fan, I go to Rocky and Bullwinkle here. And, this is a pretty involved machine where there's about as much going on a screen as you'll see. And I want to hit... Again, I've got it on my cabinet down here. This, in essence, is, I think it's the F11. And if I go up here, you'll see the frames per second. Okay. Now it's the very top line there. And I showed this off on the first machine I made where I was like about 160 frames per second. And I've seen it go about as high as like 300 or so. And that's for my computer, right? So it's not for everybody's computer. It's whatever your computer can handle. How many frames can it produce in a second? This one would have been well over 60 before. I've got it as a maximum of 60 now. And I'm bringing this up. I think it's important to put in the video because I have that matching up with what my monitor, my playfield here, can handle. This Acer DM431K. Someone actually told me they're having a hard time getting a hold of this one right now. I got this one because the 430, whatever the letter was after it, but the 430 was not so easily available. So I bought this 43-inch one, and I'm pretty happy with the angles that it has. I know you can kind of see the reflection there, but I have a plan for that later on. And you know how it doesn't get that much darker when I go lower, although you still have to deal with that reflection. And I like the colors, and the blacks don't get that black, but that's okay. But I only went with 60 hertz. I didn't think about going with 120 or anything else. And I see some people pushing real high levels of that, the number of frames per second that it can handle. So I was doing a little research on that. And I guess what I want to talk about is why I've got a 60 megahertz, or I should say hertz, a 60 hertz playfield here, and not a 120, and I don't really care to have a 120. From my understanding, what makes 120s better than 60s is that it can handle a movie with 24 frames a second. So I don't really have any movies here to necessarily show. But, for instance, let's say I go to YouTube. I'll just go ahead and bring up I don't even know what the frame rate refresh is on my back glass, right? This is just I was looking up something there that you'll see in a minute. Let's just say I go to YouTube and I just show anything. Here's World of VPX. I'm a big fan of that. So let's say I click on that and I'm watching this, and YouTube can only handle a certain number of frames per second too, right? Probably handles, I don't know, no more than 50. I can't imagine it's even as high as 60. And you will see a certain number of frames per second. So no matter what you're doing, no matter what you're watching on YouTube, it's never going to be, it's going to be fairly smooth, but it's not going to be the smoothest it possibly could be. So here's World of VPX guy who does a great job. I guess there's an update on Atleta, and he's kind of showing this. And I mean, I'd be really impressed if this looks good on what you're seeing, because if you think about it, he had a virtual pinball showing this. He filmed it. He put it on YouTube. I'm showing it on YouTube on my TV, on my back glass, my plasma, and I'm going to post it on YouTube, and you are watching that. So this probably looks absolutely terrible. When you watch things on YouTube, which is where I'm posting this stuff, we can only see it as good as YouTube can handle, and only as good as our Wi-Fi can handle. And so there's all those issues. That's something that is a little misleading when it comes to watching videos on virtual pinball and trying to see how close it is to the real thing, because we're like 2 levels out. It's not a real pinball machine, it's virtual pinball. And I'm seeing virtual pinball, but you're watching a video of virtual pinball. In fact, right now, you're watching a video of a video. So it's probably going to have what's called Judder, Judder. Judder is when you have, and this is kind of a math thing where you don't have one number being a multiple of the other, where you get the frames per second of what your processor can handle and the frames per second of what your display can handle, and they're not really in sync. So this was a problem that I actually had when I would play a game where my frames per second was 90. If it was 60, it looked great. If it was 120, it looked great. If it was 90, it didn't. And it's because 90 and 60 are not very in sync with each other. You know, I would have one frame that kind of jumps two, and then one would be right on, and then it would miss another one. And look up Judder if you want a better explanation for it. But that would be a potential issue in any of this stuff. So I found myself hoping that I would get particular tables that were closer to 60 or 120 or I guess 180 or anything that was like a multiple of 60 instead of 90 or whatnot. Hey, no more ads. We don't need to see ads. I don't want any ads on this, so I'm certainly not going to show that. So what I realized is, you know what I can do? I can go to my NVIDIA card. I'm going to show it down here. Put the control panel. I think I needed to update something, like a firmware or whatever it was. And when I go to manage 3D settings, and this works if you've got an NVIDIA, under that right there, if you go to global settings and go down to maximum frame rate, that you can set. And I have now set it to 60 FPS, 60 frames per second. If I had a 75 FPS monitor, I would set it to 75. But I have it linked up that way so that my computer is showing just as many frames as my monitor, my playfield, can handle. That gives me the smoothest experience I possibly can have. As I go, okay, I'll do it. I'll go to AC/DC. Everybody does. I'll go to AC/DC. Like I said, I'm more of a Helen fan. So this should look about as good as anything out there. If you have a 120 and you have a computer that can handle 120 frames per second as a capped, like a maximum rate, it's going to look better. But I don't think it looks much better. And that's the point I'm trying to make here. Look at this playfield. Very involved. Lots of flashing lights. But how much movement do you see? How many things do you see that are moving from one area to another? This isn't Call of Duty. This is not like you move over here and someone's coming at you and there's just all this constant movement. What do you really have when it comes to movement on a virtual pinball machine? That's what you have. And I should make that like fire or something, right? You have the ball. That's what's moving. Is anything else actually moving? Maybe you see a little motion up there on a pop bumper. Certainly on the DMD, there's some, well, things that change, but I don't know if it's really movement. So personally, I don't think for virtual pinball, that was a pretty good run considering I never hit the flipper. I don't think you would ever need more than 60 hertz. I know some people feel pretty happy with their 30 hertz machine, as long as they've got it synced up where everything's working fine. And the graphics can handle it. It doesn't make sense to go any higher than 60. So I bring this up because people might say, oh, I need 120 megahertz. Well, do you? I mean 120 hertz. I don't think you do. Not for virtual pinball. What's moving? The ball's moving. That's it. Now you might disagree with me and maybe know more about graphics than I do, but that's my feeling on this, and I'm sticking with it. I'm happy with 60 hertz on this machine. I just don't think, and if there was a difference, you know, the ball here might show like a little streaking, maybe a tiny bit of streaking compared to a 120. You know what? I like that effect. And again, what you're watching right now, you're watching it on a YouTube video. So if this shows some judder, it's not my machine. It's you watching my movie of the machine that I put on YouTube and you're watching it. So it's all those issues, right? It's a shame you don't see these available in stores where you can go try it out for yourself. You don't. You know, they're just really, particularly, there you go, Angus, moon me for a 20, okay. I didn't get the match. I did nothing and I got 1.6 mil. I wanted to point that out. Try to sync up your video card so that it matches up with the number of hertz on your playfield. The backglass doesn't really matter. There's hardly any motion there. A lot of people are happy with 1080 or even 720. for their back glass. They certainly don't need to go 4K. You know, I've got this plasma TV that's like 11 or 12 years old. The sound is fine, so I don't need to put in any speakers. I don't have any DOF on this. Someday I might look into it, but to me, I never played pinball thinking that it felt good. To me, it looked good, and maybe the chimes sounded good, but it's mostly about appearance to me. Maybe someday I'll go DOF, but for what I need, it's what is here. And again, as I hit F11 on this machine, you'll see that I'm averaging right about 60. There it is, 60.0, right up there in the upper left there. That's the smoothest thing I could possibly get. And what's the advantage to 60? There's no judder, right? I'm not taxing my computer as much. And I'm gonna play one more game because I wanna see if you notice this. This was an added benefit, as I could put extra coins here. This was an added benefit that I didn't think about. I have less lag time. We all have a little bit of lag time on our machines. I'm kind of noticing it here. Again, this is a fairly involved machine. But when I hit the button here, this lag that I have now is less than it was before. My machine, before I put the maximum frames per second out there, was maybe showing like 150, 160 frames per second, and my computer was working so hard on that there was a more considerable lag on my flippers. Now that I cap it at 60, I can't say the lag is gone, and the more powerful computer you have, the less lag you will have, but it's better off. Here, I'll try Power Up. Forget who did this. This is based on AC/DC's most recent album. Never thought I'd be an AC/DC guy here, but that's what I'm showing you because that's where I am, hanging out in the A's today. So if you're someone that really can't stand having the lag, I don't blame you. This does a better job. So, you know, I have a i5 9700K. There are i7s out there, right? My graphics card is a 1660 Ti. There are 3080s out there. I don't need it. This is good enough for me. And my lag's not bad at all. And if you think that's a bad lag, trust me, you get used to it right away. But my lag has improved. The latency has dropped now because I've worked harder at, I've set up the machine so that it is in sync with this. And again, this was just something that I thought people who were kind of new to the virtual pinball community might benefit from as I grab my coffee. You like that? There's my other new thing. I put in a couple of cup holders. So if this helps, great. If not, watch some other video. Thanks for watching.